This is Pastor Phil from First Lutheran, Mission Hills, Kansas. A few weeks ago, our first reading was from the book of Amos, which is my personal favorite prophetic Old Testament book because the message is so applicable to our modern day context. It comes from a time called the time of the divided kingdom, where there were two kings, one in Judah, one in Israel. Amos is from Judah, but he's sent to Israel to prophesy in and against Israel for some things that were going wrong there. Amos uses a phrase over and over, the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord was something that people were looking forward to, where they hoped that God would intervene in the human story to bring justice. In other words, to vindicate the righteous, those who are living righteous and holy lives, and smite or bring justice to those who were living wickedly and taking advantage of others. But what it usually ended up was that the people who were living wickedly were always the guys next door. You know, God's going to come down and smite the Chaldeans. God's going to come down and smite the Philistines. Amos's message to Israel is, if you're hoping for the day of the Lord, if you're hoping for God to smite the wicked, you better make sure first that you're not one of the wicked. And in particular, what had gone wrong in Israel was that they had started focusing on the wrong things as it related to the pursuit of pleasing God. In other words, they had started focusing on honoring festivals, holy days, burning incense, making sacrifices, temple worship. That's what they'd been focusing on, while at the same time, the poor were suffering while the rich were getting richer. And Amos's message is that this was abhorrent to God. At the core of his message is this very harsh but beautiful phrase where God says, I hate your festivals. I despise your solemn assemblies. Take away the noise of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Clear message. It would be as if God's saying to us at First Lutheran, I hate your worship services. I hate your services of communion and baptism. Take away the noise of your organ, but let justice roll down like waters. In other words, if we're hanging our hats on something that we hope to please God, the outward observance of ritual is not going to cut the mustard. Is not going to be what pleases God. Now, those things, I believe, are and can be pleasing to God when they're in the context of a whole life lived in the faith. When those services inspire us and equip us to go out into the world and live as God's children. But when we separate them off and act as if those things on their own are going to please God while we're around taking advantage of folks, being non-empathetic, not being generous, concerning ourselves only with what we can get, amassing as much as we can, there's a disconnect there that God does not appreciate. That's why that's so applicable to our modern day, I think. And it's a big calling. It forces us to realize that we can't compartmentalize our faith. We can't say, here's the hour a week for God, here's the 30 minutes on Wednesday for devotional time, here's the amount of resources that I'll commit to the things of the faith. Rather, the faith is a whole calling upon how we live. Are we living justly? Are we paying attention to justice? When we get up in the morning, what are some of our motivations? And is one of those motivations living in a way that recognizes those who are suffering need us, that those who don't have need our generosity, and that God cares about those things and that those are holy things, just as holy as the things we do in church. But it's a blessing too, even though it's a high calling and something that takes a lot from us, it also gives back because when we recognize that we can bring holiness into each and every moment, we can recognize that everything good about worship, all the feelings of connectedness and being embraced by God, all the joy that we experience through doing holy things like communion, like worshiping, are available to us whenever we live justly, whenever we act with justice, whenever we act with kindness and generosity, whenever we follow those things, it's sort of like we're bringing church with us. And that's the whole point, is that we come to the sanctuary so that we become a sanctuary for the Holy Spirit. And so that when we leave here, we take a piece of that with us. We have the opportunity to become spaces of holiness wherever we go. And I think that's a wonderful way to think about it. And Amos helps us to realize that. So I hope that you're able to find time today to to do something holy, do something righteous. And it doesn't require coming here to church where I am at the moment. It can be where anyone needs you, and you can help them in God's name. God's blessings to you this day, and I hope to see you soon.